Welcome to Brick by Brick, Building Wealth Through Homeownership. I am Kim Von Dohren, your realtor.
And I'm your banker, Ed Marko. So we left off last time with how do we get a tenant? Or how do we vet a tenant? Or how do we make sure that if we're going to let somebody rent our house, they're decent people? I know you've got a process because you're good at this. So why don't you give us a mile-high view of your process, and then we'll dive into each little part of it if you'd like.
Okay. I do have a process. I've been a landlord now for, goodness, how long has it been? 13 years probably? Yeah, for sure. 13 years a landlord. And, when I decided to become an investor in real estate, the one thing that all the landlords would say is what a nightmare the tenants are. And that was, it's intimidating to hear that. There's 1,000 horror stories. I could tell you all the ones I've heard. And so I think a lot of people don't want to be landlords, and that's what prevents them from becoming investors. Is that your experience? I think you have a personal experience where that
correct.
was a deterrent for you, correct?
That's why we just flipped. We were a landlord for a little while, didn't have a good experience with it. It seemed like there was more work involved than we cared to be involved in. And it was time consuming. I don't want to be, I like people, don't misunderstand me, but I don't want to be your buddy, and I'm not your dad. I'm your landlord. This is a business arrangement. So anything more than that was I can't, I'm not a charity.
Yeah.
So it was just easier for me to just flip a house rather than be a landlord. We think about doing it every once in a while again, but I'm just not inclined that way. But now you're making me think because of some of the stuff you were talking about. So
Yeah.
Tell us about your process when you've got a property, it's going to be up for rent next month because your tenant's moving out.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do?
Right.
How do you get a new tenant?
So I'll give you the overview, and then we can get a little bit more into the details. But the one thing I would say in advance of getting into specifics is that a lot of work up front prevents a lot of problems down the road.
So be prepared.
Well, not so much be prepared, but yes, you do need to be prepared. You need to have systems in place and practices that you do over and over and over again.
Okay.
But this is the thing that will save you from the headaches down the road of a bad tenant or having to evict somebody. Now, you can't protect yourself 100%, but you can minimize those risks by doing the things that I do. I don't have a fail-safe here, but what I have are strategies that I have found work really well to prevent me from ending up in a bad dynamic with a tenant.
So you have a process to vet these people in advance.
That's right. So the first thing that you're going to have to do is you're going to have to market the property.
Mm-hmm.
So as a realtor, I know from experience, and just for reference, when I became a realtor, I specifically started at an agency that offered property management so that I could learn their practices and procedures for how do they handle property management, how do they vet tenants. And so I, took that and evolved it to work for me.
Okay.
So you're going to have to market the property.
So that's like advertise it.
Yes. On any one of the many websites out there for real estate, you can go create an account, go in there and list your property.
Okay.
Now, the instant you do that, you are going to get inundated with text messages, phone calls, emails, because especially if you have a desirable rental, there are going to be dozens and dozens and dozens of inquiries. It is and can be very overwhelming. Now, what I found is that the majority of those inquiries are about things that I could prevent by providing as much information as possible up front.
Okay.
So the more information I give you initially, the less time you have to spend calling me and I have to spend answering your questions.
Okay.
My goal is to talk to candidates who are true, viable candidates.
Okay.
Not everybody who's interested in my property. So one of the first things I did was I created a website.
Okay.
I am not tech savvy in the least, but there are sites. What are they called? Like we won't mention their names, but the
Right.
place, for example, where I host mine. What is
Right.
those? What are
So
those called?
that's a hosting site. So
Okay.
you want web hosting and website creation. They generally offer the two of them.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter if it's who it is really, but you look for the ones that offer two. There's big names out there. They
Yes.
sponsor Super Bowl ads. Everybody
Yeah.
knows who they are.
Yeah.
That's one place, but there's lots of them, and they're relatively inexpensive compared to what you're getting.
Absolutely.
So less than $500 a year, you're going to have a pretty basic website and probably email address.
Yep.
And then a template tool for you just point and click.
Yes, that's exactly what I have.
Yeah.
And it's a lifesaver because I can direct inquiries there and I will have already answered every question that they're going to have on that website.
Right.
So that we don't need to have a conversation, so that they know whether or not they're capable of taking the next step with me or not.
Okay.
So on that website, so let me back up. So I will post a listing. In that post, starting there, I am going to be as specific as I can about what am I paying for? What is the tenant paying for? What kind of heat is it? Because that's a question I'm going to get. Can they have pets? What kind of pets? How long's the lease? All those questions. You're going to get all those questions. So again, I try to include those basics in the listing. Then the other thing I like to do is then get them to go from that listing to my website, where on the website, I list tenant qualifications. And you have to meet those tenant qualifications to have a showing, right? So far, all I've done is marketed my property to you. We haven't spoken, hopefully. You haven't looked at the property. Nothing's happened here yet. You're just looking.
Well, I've looked at the pictures of the property.
Yes,
on the
and
internet.
that's the other thing.
Yeah.
Make sure you put good pictures up.
Yeah.
Like when there's 3 pictures and you took them with your cell phone. I mean, I know the market's pretty easy around getting renters right now, but offer a great product, you get a great renter.
Right.
So yes, they've seen the pictures because, again, the more information you can provide in that initial listing, the better off you are. Now, they've gone to my website, they've looked, and let's assume they've met all the tenant qualifications.
Give me some examples of tenant qualifications.
You have to earn, you have to have household income 3 times my rental rate.
Okay, so if the rent's $1,000 a month, I have to make at least $3,000 a month.
You don't, but everybody who's an earner and going to be a tenant in the property and fill out an application, those incomes need to total that number for sure.
Okay, so household income.
Yeah.
What about if they've got that and $3,000 worth of other debts?
Right, that's a problem.
Yeah.
So then so when you go in there and they read the tenant qualifications like those,
right,
and so they say, yes, okay, we make $3,000 a month. That works. Okay. All right. So now their next step would be go underneath tenant qualifications where I have document called instructions and a document that is the application.
Okay.
Then they can read the instructions, which will tell them to fill out the application, send it to me with 2 pay stubs, their 2 most recent pay stubs and a driver's license.
Okay.
Now, on the application, it's going to list your income and it's going to list your liabilities.
Okay.
So even if you're making $3,000 a month, but you have, credit card debt and a car payment and all of these other debt payments, and now you really only have like $1,000 left to pay your rent, buy your groceries, get your hair cut, all of those things, that's not enough. You won't be earning enough. So that's a guideline. The 3 times the rental rate is a guideline. That's a minimum guideline.
Right.
So after they send me the application with their proof of income and their ID, I can now look and see what their debt to income ratio is based off of their income and their liabilities.
But they haven't seen the apartment yet or the house yet.
Correct.
You haven't met them in person yet.
Right.
You already have a good idea then as to whether or not they're going to qualify to actually live there.
Right.
That's slick.
Nobody is stepping foot into my house for a showing unless I know, tentatively at least, that you financially can afford to rent my property. That is a waste of my time.
Right.
It's a waste of their time.
Yeah.
So That's why I do this procedure. And believe me, I get pushback from tenants who don't want to have to do that before they see the property. Guess what? You're not my tenant. That's
Right.
fine. You
Yeah.
don't have to do it, but you're not my tenant.
Yeah.
So the other thing is the instructions.
Hmm.
I make it very simple. And yet the challenge people seem to have with following the instructions is shocking.
Yeah.
And, a good example is I had a rental property in the city and I put it up and I think I estimated there were over 300 inquiries.
Wow.
Right? Just imagine managing that alone is
Right.
just so burdensome. I set up an open house. I had a table at the door and then my husband was there also. And I literally had a line of people coming in because once they came in, they had to sign in because I needed to know who you were. And long story short, one of the candidates came up to me and said, "You have the rent too low." That's why you have so many candidates, which was fine. But you have to, and I had multiple applicants.
Right.
However, they did not read the instructions. So they'd give me their application, but they wouldn't give me their 2 most recent pay stubs. Or they'd give me their 2 most recent pay stubs, but they wouldn't include their driver's license. It's not my job to chase you down to provide me the information I have indicated you need to provide to become a candidate. So I worked with a few people to see, and we just couldn't quite sort it out. And I said, I am done with this experience. It was overwhelming. There were so many not viable candidates that I ended up taking it off the market, leaving the physical sign on the property, and it sat there vacant for 3 months.
Wow.
One day I went into my email, and in my email was an application with all the proper documentation and a woman saying to me, I am interested in renting your property. And I went down because she did qualify. I showed her the property. And then ultimately we did her checks, which is a step we haven't gotten to yet. And she is now my tenant and has been my tenant since that day. But I refused. I let that unit sit vacant for 3 months rather than put a tenant in there that I would potentially have to kick out down the road.
So you're very patient then when it comes to getting there. You're not rushed. You're going to make sure that whoever's going to be in there is going to be in there.
That's how I minimize my headache.
Do you check their credit?
Yes. So let's assume that we have made it through the initial steps of you have checked, you meet all the minimum requirements, you give me an application,
Mm-hmm.
and I say, let's schedule a showing. Showings are another thing, especially if you have many, many inquiries. You do not want to spend your time driving back and forth to that property. My rental properties are 30 minutes from my house. I am not spending an hour driving back and forth for 6 showings in one day or over 2 days.
Okay.
So what I have done to minimize that hassle is I usually pick 2 windows of time in a week. I start with one, and that's a weekday, usually between 4 and 6 p.m. You have to think in terms of when are people working. So between 4 and 6 p.m. is the best case scenario for people to come view the property on a weekday. And then I try to do a Saturday afternoon, maybe 1 to 3. And then everybody comes in those time windows. I don't care if you come at 1:15 or 2:45, but that's the window of time you are permitted to come. And you must send a text message 1 hour prior to the showing to indicate that you are absolutely 100% showing up. Because if I go there and you no show, I'm going to be upset.
Right.
So again, the majority of my strategies are designed for me to avoid all the people who are just going to waste my time.
Right.
And sorting out who the real candidates are. Now, I don't care really at all what your family dynamic is. I don't care what color your skin is. I don't care what your gender or non-gender is. I don't care about any of that stuff.
Right.
All I care about is that you are a responsible human being who is going to pay me my rent in full, on time, every single solitary month, and you're not going to trash my property.
Right.
That's all I'm looking for, right? All other things don't matter to me. However, I will say this. Some folks are cleaner than other folks. Some folks have pets. Most folks have pets. So that's going to have to be a decision that you make. You will eliminate the possibility for candidates if you don't allow pets. We touched on this, I think.
Right.
I try to be a little bit discriminating about how many pets I allow.
Right.
And I literally had somebody had a rabbit that had a room of its own. They covered the floor in the room and they had a rabbit. So, there's all these weird scenarios that happen. So, okay, I'm sorry. Let me, because I can digress very easily. This is a very interesting topic to me. So they've completed their application. I've shown them the property. We've met each other.
Right.
This is an important part in the process.
Right.
Do we like each other? Right?
Yeah.
Do we vibe? Do you sense this person is a responsible human? Do you sense they're telling you the truth?
Right.
Because you don't want to bring somebody in who doesn't tell you the truth.
Right.
Because there will be a multitude of opportunities for them to lie to you about things. So you want to talk to them, ask them questions, get to know them. Share who you are as a landlord so that they understand what they're getting themselves into. This is a relationship. So after you've done that, if you both want to move forward, at that point, this is the first moment where it's going to actually cost the prospective tenant some money. And that is a very small amount of money. It's about $45 at the moment. The particular site that I use that basically gives me access to your credit report and credit score, your criminal background, and your eviction history. That site allows me to go in, provide your email for which property I have entered into that site. It will send that tenant an email. They click the email, they go in, they pay the $45 fee to that site. It doesn't come to me. I don't make a penny off any of my tenants. I will tell you there are landlords that do, and that's up to them. They can do that if they want to, because this is a huge investment of my time.
Right.
So if you want to charge somebody to do that legwork, that's your right to do that. I don't do it, but
plenty do, yeah.
You can. So they pay the $45. It sends me their reports. I review them, and then I decide, okay, do I want to extend this person an offer? Well, the one thing, and this is the one thing that will really, really tell you if this is somebody you want living in your house, call their previous landlord.
Right.
You must speak to the prior landlord. That is a non-negotiable.
Right.
Now, I have had more than one person provide a name of their previous landlord who was not, in fact, their landlord. This happened on more than one occasion.
Wow.
It's usually a friend of theirs.
Yeah.
So you got to be smart.
Yeah.
So a simple question is what is the address of the rental property that they rented from you? Well, as a landlord, I know the address of every single property that I own and rent.
Right.
If they can't tell me the address, that's a concern. So that's an indication right out of the gate. The other one is if they don't want to talk to you.
Right.
Because I have really great tenants. They maybe weren't perfect, but they were great tenants. And I would be happy to give a referral when they need to go somewhere else. So if this person doesn't want to talk to you, that's another indication. Okay.
Right.
And you can tell just by talking to them, even if they don't tell you anything. I don't ask them questions that would make them terribly uncomfortable on purpose. But I will say, would you rent again to that tenant?
Right.
And that answer alone tells a story.
Right.
So you want to have that conversation. Make sure you use your detective skills to make sure you're talking to the right person.
For sure.
Yep. And then if that clears and you feel good about it, you extend an offer. And hopefully they accept. If they choose to accept, my next step is now I need a deposit to hold the property and take it off the market, stop showings and other potential candidates. That deposit is equal to 1 month's rent, which will then be applied towards your first month's rent. But you got to get that to me in a cashier's check, and it has to come, or you can Venmo it to me, which is my new favorite way to receive money. Everyone Venmo me money. I love the sound of the cha-ching when I get paid. so that you can Venmo me the money or you can give me a cashier's check, and then I will hold the property. I will then complete the lease. My lease is long and it has many addendums, and that is a whole nother podcast.
Yes.
But I always send it to the tenant first in advance in a PDF form so that they have the opportunity to review every word of it, so they're not signing something that they don't know about.
Right.
And then on the day that we have the lease signing, which happens at the property, they have to come along with the account numbers for any utilities that must go in their name, and they must bring a paid receipt for 1 year's renter's insurance.
Okay.
We will walk the property together. We will notate any concerns, damage. I will take photographs. We will sign the documents. I will collect the money and give you the keys, and we will hopefully not have to speak again for a while. And then that's how I vet my tenants.
That's great information. So when you do that, that's an excellent process. It's well thought out. It's very thorough. I've heard a couple processes similar to not anywhere near this thorough. So if I'm thinking about becoming a landlord, I'm going to listen to this a few times, take some notes. I think we'll end it here, and then next time we'll talk about what happens if the process fails and we have a bummer client.
Yeah.
There's a whole process to the evicting somebody.
And if you have questions, because I know I covered a lot, make sure you give us questions and we'll address them.
Absolutely. Until next time, I'm Ed Marko.
And I'm Kim Von Dohren.
You have been listening to Brick by Brick. Be sure and subscribe, post questions for future episodes, or comment. This is a Super Squirrel production, Super Squirrel Studios, Stony Creek Mills, Pennsylvania.